Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're stepping away from the familiar image of World War I trench warfare on the Western Front.
Yeah, we're heading east. A very different kind of war, especially in 1915.
Exactly. We're looking at the Eastern Front, immense, brutal, and often well overlooked. This story is about grand maneuvers, high stakes, and a truly devastating cost.
We're focusing on the Rowno campaign, or the Feldzug nach Rowno, as the Austro-Hungarians called it. Autumn 1915.
And this offensive is really crucial, isn't it? It tells us so much about the Austro-Hungarian army, the k.u.k. army, at a critical moment.
It absolutely does. It exposes some deep structural weaknesses.
So our mission today is to unpack this offensive. The goal was Rowno, deep in Russian territory, Volhynia. We'll trace the rapid initial success, the equally rapid collapse, the Russian counterpunch.
And crucially, the human cost. Over 150,000 casualties. We need to understand what that meant for Austria-Hungary moving forward.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, when we say k.u.k.
Right, that's Kaiserlichen Königlich. Imperial and Royal, the Austro-Hungarian army. A huge multinational force, already fighting on multiple fronts by 1915, and very importantly, heavily reliant on German support.
That reliance is key. Okay, so let's set the stage. The gathering storm. This follows the huge Russian Great Retreat in the summer of 1915.
It did. The Russian southwest front had been pushed back hundreds of kilometers. From the perspective of the Central Powers, it looked like the Russians might be nearing breaking point.
And the Austro-Hungarian Chief of General Staff, Konrad von Hötzendorf, saw an opportunity.
He certainly did. He issued a directive August 21st. The objective wasn't just, clearing Austrian land like Ostgalicia.
No, it was much bigger than that.
Much bigger. He wanted to push deep into Russian territory, Volhynia, and achieve a decisive battle victory, something that could potentially knock Russia out of the war, or at least cripple its southern armies.
A knockout blow. And they threw significant weight behind it. The k.u.k. 1st, 2nd, and 4th armies were involved in the main push.
A massive commitment. But the Russians, while retreating, weren't broken. General Rowno was still commanding their southwest front.
Okay.
He'd lost some infantry divisions sent north, yes, but he still had considerable cavalry. And crucially, General Alexei Brusilov commanding the 8th Army right opposite the main Austro-Hungarian thrust.
Brusilov, a name that will become very significant later.
Very. He wasn't known for giving up ground easily, even in retreat.
So what were the specific targets? Rowno was the big prize, but what about the steps to get there?
The initial key objectives were places like Kaul and Lutsk, or Lutsk. These were vital rail junctions and crossroads in Volhynia.
Control the transport hubs, control the region.
Exactly. Taking them would seriously destabilize the Russian front there. Rowno was further east, the bigger strategic goal, the symbol of the victory Konrad envisioned.
Right. So the plan is set. August 26th, the offensive launches. And this is where we enter the inferno, the actual advance. It starts incredibly fast, right?
Yeah. Astonishingly fast. General Puhalo's First Army, in particular, just surged forward. They crossed the Luga River, then the Stockade, then the Star.
It's just rolling over obstacles.
Seemingly. One key formation, the Octave Corps Group Roth, moved so quickly they were closing in on Luck almost immediately.
And Luck fell.
Yes, remarkably quickly. By August 31st, just 5 days in, the First Army had taken Luck. And the next day, the Second Army captured Brody, further south, basically without a fight.
So on the surface, it looks like a stunning success.
It does. But this is where Konrad's relentless push for speed becomes a problem. He was urging Puhalo immediately after taking a place called Rosices to cross the Star River and drive straight for Rowno via Klawan.
No consolidation, just keep going.
Exactly. Speed above all else. And while they achieved this deep penetration, suddenly miles inside Russian territory, it stretched their supply lines incredibly thin and left their flanks dangerously, fatally exposed.
You can picture it advancing through this vast, difficult terrain of Volhynia, the front lines shifting constantly. Logistics must have been a nightmare.
A complete nightmare. And the troops were feeling it. Units like the IX Corps were fighting off Russian counterattacks, even while being ordered to push forward towards Zátersy.
So they're advancing, yes, but they're also exhausted and constantly fighting just to keep moving.
And that exhaustion, that stretched, thin reality, leads directly to the next phase, the clash at the crossroads. The momentum just dies.
It runs out of steam.
Completely. By early September, say around the 5th, the initial attacks aimed at the actual Rowno defensive line are stalling.
Where specifically?
Well, the k.u.k. X-Corps attack near Cuman, aimed at Rowno, it just zerschelte shattered against the defenses of the Russian 12th Army Corps. They couldn't break through. The offensive had hit a wall.
And at the same time, the Russians start showing their own capability.
Oh, yes. Tactical brilliance, really. Even before that main assault stalled back on September 3rd, the Russian 8th Corps launched a surprise counterattack.
Where did that hit?
It punched right through the Austro-Hungarian First Army's line between their I and II Corps. It was a sharp, sudden blow, showing just how vulnerable those stretched-out k.u.k. forces were.
A clear warning sign.
It's definitely a warning. But the really decisive move came from the Russian High Command, from General Iwanow. He did something quite remarkable with his reserves.
What was that?
He identified a strong, relatively fresh force, the Russian XXX Army Corps, with the 71st and 74th Reserve Divisions, which was positioned on the quieter Sereth Front, further south.
Okay, so he has reserves available.
Yes, but the genius was how he moved them, not marching them for weeks. He used the railways.
Ah, strategic mobility.
Exactly. Pulled that entire corps off the southern front, loaded them onto trains, shipped them rapidly across the theater, and unloaded them directly at Rowno.
Right into the critical zone.
Right where they were needed most. And this powerful, fresh corps was immediately launched into a flank attack against the deepest point of the Austro-Hungarian advance near Kluan.
That's a game changer. A fresh corps appearing on your flank when you thought you were driving towards victory.
It was the turning point. Pure chaos for the k.u.k. forces.
So when does this Russian counterblow land?
September 16th. The Russian XXX Corps hits the flank of the k.u.k. 4th Army near Klan and Rowno and just breaks through their front.
In the consequence.
Immediate and drastic. The entire k.u.k. 4th and 1st Armies were forced into a rapid retreat. They had to pull back behind the Ikwa and Styr rivers just to avoid being encircled and destroyed.
A full-scale retreat. The offensive is collapsing.
It is. And the low point, the real symbol of the failure, comes on September 23rd. Lutsk, the city they took so quickly just weeks before, falls back into Russian hands.
Russians took prisoners.
Thousands. The Russian XXX Corps captured 12,000 k.u.k. soldiers in Lutsk that day alone. It was a catastrophe. Conrad's offensive was described as completely faltering. They had burned through everything. No reserves left.
It sounds like total collapse was imminent. How did they even stabilize the situation? Purely through external help. German help, specifically.
Ah, the Allies step in.
Just in time. On September 25th, the German XE40 Reserve Corps, known as Group Gerock, arrived from the Bug Army sector to the north.
And then they attacked.
Immediately. Group Gerock struck the right flank of Brusilow's Russian 8th Army near k.u.k. This pressure forced the victorious Russian XXX Corps, the ones who had just retaken Lutsk, to pull back from the Kluan-Oleka line to avoid being outflanked themselves.
So the German attack relieved the pressure on the Austro-Hungarians.
Critically. This allowed the battered k.u.k. forces to launch what's sometimes called the second Angriffs phase, a second offensive phase, really a counterattack. They managed to recross the Styr River.
And retake Lutsk.
Just barely. They reoccupied Lutsk on September 26th. By September 28th, the front line was stabilized along the Styr River line, the Styr Abschnitt. The immediate crisis was over.
Stabilized, but at what cost? This brings us to the aftermath. Indeed, the Central Powers, the Middle Mechta, ended up holding territory up to the Styr River. So on the map, it looks like a game compared to the start of the summer.
But the real story is the losses.
The losses were astronomical. And this is the key takeaway for you, the learner. The Rowno campaign itself cost the k.u.k. forces over 150,500 men.
150,000. And about a month of fighting.
Let that sink in. That breaks down to roughly 10,300 killed, about 40,000 wounded. But the really crippling number is the prisoners, over 74,000 men captured.
74,000 captured. That's just devastating for morale and manpower.
It gutted experienced units. These weren't raw recruits. Many were veterans from 1914, the experienced NCOs and soldiers the Army desperately needed.
And some armies were hit harder than others.
Yes. The k.u.k. Second Army, despite making territorial gains initially, suffered the worst, nearly 69,000 casualties. And if you look at the entire autumn offensive period, not just the Rowno part, the total k.u.k. losses were over 230,000.
250,000 men.
A staggering figure. This wasn't just a setback, it was a bleeding out of the Army's core strength. It fundamentally weakened the Austro-Hungarian military for the rest of the war.
And it highlights the flaw in Conrad's strategy.
Absolutely. This constant push for the absolute victory, the knockout blow, without the logistical capacity or the reserves to sustain it or absorb a counterattack, it was ambition completely disconnected from reality.
And it increased their dependence on Germany.
Massively. After Rowno, the k.u.k. army was even more reliant on German support to simply hold the line, let alone conduct offensives. You see the consequences leading directly into things like the Brusilov offensive the following year, 1916.
So let's recap the sequence for everyone. First, this incredibly ambitious, fast push into Volhynia, driven by Conrad's desire for a decisive win.
Followed by the well-timed, brilliantly executed Russian counterblow, orchestrated by Rowno and Brusilov, using railways for rapid troop deployment to hit the exposed flank.
Which led to a near collapse, only averted at the last minute by German intervention, stabilizing the line along the Styr.
It's a stark lesson, isn't it? The clash between a command structure demanding unrealistic results and the brutal realities of logistics, troop exhaustion, and enemy capabilities.
It shows how quickly apparent success can unravel.
And how dangerous that peak moment of success can be, the point where you've gone too far and can't sustain it. That's when disaster often strikes.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. They never actually took Rowno. That ultimate goal remained out of reach.
No, they didn't.
The cost we discussed, over 150,000 casualties, was essentially the price paid just to stabilize the front after their own offensive failed and provoked that massive Russian counterattack. If failure cost that much, what might the cost have been if they'd actually pushed further, deeper towards Rowno, stretching themselves even thinner?
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
What happens when an army, especially one already under strain like the k.u.k. in 1915, fundamentally outruns its ability to sustain itself, to recover, to reinforce? The Rowno campaign offers a brutal answer. It underscores the vital importance of reserves, logistics, and maybe, just maybe, strategic restraint. Lessons Conrad learned far too late.